Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another gameplay impressions video here. This time we're discussing what I think is 2022's highest rated game so far, and that is Elden Ring. So I am no stranger to the From Software catalog of challenge and rage-inducing gems. I first got into this style of game with Bloodborne. In fact, many longtime viewers may remember that I uploaded a video of me sitting in my car in the parking lot of my college at the time, essentially asking you guys, what did I get myself into? And in that video, I was telling the story of, after hearing all of the praise surrounding Bloodborne's release and the high reviews and people telling me, are you going to get the game? Are you going to try it out? Why aren't you going to play it? I decided to take a chance, and I walked into Best Buy on the release of Bloodborne. I think there were only 2 copies left, but I ended up buying the game, and I had no interest in it. I always looked at the From Software games as, sort of a niche title that, was all about the challenge and difficulty. It wasn't, narrative focused at all, and I just never really considered that could be something that would appeal to me. But I took Bloodborne home, I did an impressions video for you guys, and I think I did a 3-part impressions video, which was one of the first times I was actually doing that, and that was my first Souls-like game experience. What I got out of Bloodborne was perhaps one of the most transformative gameplay experiences that I've ever had to date. I fell in love with the game, I fell in love with its world, I fell in love with the combat, and once I actually understood the systems and understood how to play the game, I realized that the whole stigma surrounding the game's challenge and difficulty was greatly exaggerated. And so it took me about 2 or 3 months for me to actually complete Bloodborne. I loved it from start to finish. I just couldn't get enough of the game. And I knew at that point that I was now a fan of this style of game, that I was very much interested, and I ended up trying out and playing all of the From Software games from then forward. So I played and completed Dark Souls 3, I played and completed Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice, and I also played and completed the Demon's Souls remake at the launch of the PS5 a few years ago. But not only that, I also tried out other games from this genre from different publishers. So I played and completed the first Nioh and also played the second Nioh. I did not complete that one though. And I also played and completed all the Surge games and even Lords of the Fallen. So I consider myself somewhat educated with this style of game. I mean, I kind of know what to expect going into it and know essentially how to play the game, the right sort of mindset to get into when you're going to try something like this out. And so I know many of you might still be on the fence when it comes to Elden Ring. Is this a game for you? Is it super challenging? Is this going to be something that is going to appeal to me? And so I hope that this impressions video will actually help you make an informed decision about whether or not you actually want to play the game. Spoiler alert, it's actually fucking fantastic. It's a great game. So one of the main critiques I hear when it comes to this style of game is that it's impossibly challenging, that you're going to have to grind and level up your gear time and time again in order to succeed, and that you're going to have to die 1,000 times and just kind of persevere through the experience in order to get through it. And your reward for your struggle throughout this entire experience is the sense of accomplishment that you get when actually completing a boss fight. I hate this stigma because everyone who has ever said this has very clearly demonstrated that they have never played a game of this style. They are going based off of the great exaggerations of others, of similar people who have never played this style of game. Are these games challenging? Yes. Will you be having to die many times? Probably. However, they are not impossible to play, and you don't need to spend hours upon hours grinding and leveling up your gear. I'm 30 hours into Elden Ring right now, and I have never grinded once in this game, and I am doing just fine. In fact, I'm doing actually pretty great, and I'll explain why in a moment. And in fact, what From Software games and very similar style of games like this are really a challenge of is not your skill set as a gamer, but rather your patience to be able to understand the movesets, your openings, and strategize when the correct time to attack your foe is. This is a game that tests your patience. The moment that you start to get greedy with this game, it will slap you upside the head and remind you just how fragile your character is. Every single death that I have ever had in this game, I should say 99%, because there is that occasional one where the camera gets, stuck in a corner or something stupid. 99% of all the deaths that I've had in this game were as a result of me not understanding the moveset of the enemy, getting too greedy with my attacks and thus leaving myself open for other attacks, and just charging in head first and not really understanding the environment or where people were placed. This is part of the appeal of this game for a lot of people, but it's also a demonstration of the strategy that is required in order to be successful at this game. Patience is your most valuable tool when playing a game of this style. It means walking into a room carefully with your shield up or with some type of protection, being ready to dodge because enemies are hiding around the corners or up on the ceilings ready to come down and kill you. Once you understand that this is the way that the game works, that the game will at times play with you and troll you a little bit, and yeah, there's some, kind of shitty things that the developers do to sort of beckon first-time players and then basically trick them into dying. But once you understand essentially the way that this game is laid out and the foundations of what From Software has built from a gameplay system standpoint, it's basically a pretty easy game to essentially get into and understand and learn. Again, it's about that patience. It's about that strategy of being able to walk into a room and understand, all right, there might be an enemy from around the corner. I'm not just going to charge head first. I'm going to keep my shield up and carefully walk in and check my corners. This is the way that I've played these games, and I have been successful for many years and completed a lot of these games, even though, yes, I have died a lot of times as a result of, not understanding the basic move sets of the enemy. This is all a part of the experience, and that is okay. You have to understand that when walking into this game, that failure is not failure in the sense of, oh gosh, I wasn't good enough, now I have to retry again. You're always constantly learning. It's very much like life in that example. So specifically about Elden Ring, here's what I will say about its difficulty. Elden Ring is actually one of the easiest, if not the easiest From Software game that I have ever played. A big part of that has to do with the world of the game, and I'll get to that in a little bit, but I actually found that fairly early on in the game that I was actually killing enemies with around 2, 3, or even 4 hits. Enemies were going down with relative ease, and I found that this game's very much forgiving to brand new players and people who have never played this style of game before. In fact, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice has very clearly influenced a lot of the systems that are in Elden Ring. You now have the ability to jump in the environment, which is brand new for a game of this particular style. That was something that was introduced with Sekiro. And you also have the ability to crouch and actually do some type of stealth in the game, which allows you to sneak up behind enemies so you can do a backstab for extra damage. But in particular, the big accessibility comes in the form of this game's open world structure. From Software has never made an open world game before, and it's kind of surprising to me because I don't really look at the Dark Souls games or, even Sekiro or any of those games that they've made as linear, because the way that their level design works is they give you like separate directions, and then these directions end up kind of intersecting with one another and kind of circling back to where you were, and it becomes this whole entire network of essentially different rooms and areas that you kind of go to, and it all feels like kind of connected, like a part of a bigger world in that instance. And that's more of a compliment of just the developers' outstanding level design to do such a good job with it. But this is their first major open world game. For starters, I want to say this game is massive. In fact, it's comparable to any of the modern day Assassin's Creed games. It's so fucking huge that I started off the game, I zoomed out at the map and I was like, oh, it's not so bad. And I progressed further and further and further. And the world just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I got teleported from one end to the other and I realized, oh, I'm not on the corner of the map. I'm actually in the center of the map. And it just keeps going on and on and on. I am 30 hours into the game and I've seen about a third of the map. That is insanity. This game world is huge, and it doesn't even stop there, because once you realize that not only is it just a surface level layer of exploration that they have, you can just kind of explore the world, but there's hidden caves that go kind of underground, or secret areas that are like underground of the world. Yesterday I was visiting this entire area that was actually underneath the world, and it looked like I was part of like Inner Earth or some shit. It was like completely underground, like this entire portion of the open world. And it's just insanity. This world has so much depth. In fact, I just played Cyberpunk 2077. I was blown away by that game's artistic direction. Before that, I played Horizon Forbidden West, and I was blown away by that game's sort of variety and how much variety there was in the world in terms of like the different biomes and whatnot. Before that, I played Dying Light 2, and Dying Light 2 had 2 separate open worlds, which was kind of massive on scale. This game has all of the best elements from all of those games I just described. It has the artistic beauty. It has the variation with the biomes and stuff like Horizon does. And it has like the separate different world structures of something like Dying Light 2. You know, you have one giant world, but then you have like an underground area, which is also part of the open world that you can't access, and there's stuff above you as well. It's insanity. It has all of that combined into one to make what is one of the most massive and honestly one of the most intriguing worlds that I have yet to play in a video game. It is unlike anything I've ever seen before. It just keeps getting larger and larger, and it doesn't stop. And again, 30 hours in, and I'm a third through the game's world. In fact, probably a little bit less, is downright insanity. This game is going to last you a very long time. And what's even more impressive is with how big the world is, you're never bored looking at anything in the game. 30 hours into the game, and I'm still blown away by some of the stuff I see in the world. Like, it still surprises you. You start just kind of walking along the edge of the map, and you're thinking to yourself, there's nothing here. It's probably just, you know, maybe an item at the end. But no, you come across a secret cave entrance. You walk in there. It takes you down to a different underground cave. There's a whole set of enemies there. There's a whole optional boss there with some cool items, some cool loot. And this is just placed randomly throughout the world, and there's different areas and tunnels that you can go to. You meet new characters. There's, you know, different challenge rooms and bosses. I've never seen anything like this before. It's insane. The way that From Software has crafted this, you would think that this is made by veterans of people who've mastered the open world genre. But no, this is From Software's first open world, and it rivals and actually succeeds anything that I've seen in recent memory. I mean, all these games I just described that I've played prior to this do well at certain specific things, but From Software has all of those elements and does a great job with each. There's destructible environments even. So as you're fighting massive trolls, they're knocking down trees, they're knocking down, you know, structures and shit. It's incredible. I was actually kind of worried, to be completely honest, because one of the things I heard about this open world is that there's no sense of direction. The game doesn't have waypoints. It doesn't tell you where you're supposed to go. There's no mini map, and you're just kind of lost, and you're supposed to pick a direction, and just eventually you'll end up where you're supposed to be. Wrong. Yes, this game does not have a mini-map. It does have a map that you can access in a separate menu in the game. Yes, you can set waypoints in the game, manual waypoints, but there's no like objective waypoint. You're not going to be heading in one direction towards a little blip on your screen in order to progress to the next story element. That being said, it still tells you where to go. At the Sites of Grace, which are basically the bonfires in this game, think of them as checkpoints throughout the game's world. When you get to them, you could basically upgrade your character, refill on your health and different flasks and things like that, but it also respawns all the enemies in the game that you've killed up to that point. So it's kind of like a quick refresher, like a reset almost, if you never played a game of this style. But you have some innate ability, and it's actually narratively purposed, where you have the ability to see the guidance of grace, they call it. And essentially it's this golden aura, like this line that emits out of pure lights from where these sites of grace are, and it points to a certain direction on your map. And so you're essentially following these lines, right? This guidance of grace, which is where you're supposed to be headed to basically get to the main section of the story in the game. And although it's never present on your compass, because again, you're not sitting here going towards a little dot on your compass of where you're supposed to be, you're walking in the general direction of where you're supposed to go. And while this may seem like you can get lost very easily, you'd actually be surprised, because if you open up your map, it shows you again the general direction of where you're supposed to be headed. So it's not like you have to walk back and find that area and guess where you're supposed to go next. There's always something interesting to see. So even if you get lost, don't worry, you're never going to be bored exploring the world of this game. Somehow they were able to craft something interesting at almost every single corner. It's astounding. I'm just like in complete shock at times playing this game that even after 30 hours, I'm still surprised at almost everything I'm seeing. There's no annoying backtracking like there was sort of before in the Dark Souls games. Although I do have to say that, of course, it is an open world. You will be revisiting certain areas. But because, again, you're leveling up and you're killing enemies and upgrading your gear, the next time you revisit these areas, if you had a little bit trouble getting through them, by the time you revisit them after all your upgrades, you'll be killing everything in one shot. It's a pretty easy breeze. They give you this steed that basically allows you to ride it through the open world so you can get to places quicker, and you can fast travel at any point in the game except when in combat, obviously. But you don't have to go to a fast travel point. You just open up the map, click I want to go here, the PS5 loads it in like 4 seconds, and you're there, and it's just fantastic. So if you haven't guessed already, the world here is really the shining star of this game, and it is perhaps one of the most useful examples of how an open world game can help evolve the gameplay formula of your franchise. Because let's be honest, we've seen a lot of games, especially this last generation, take their existing franchises to an open world formula, and it doesn't always pan out. What we find is that the narrative of the games suffer as a result of this, because everything has to be drawn out, and there's excessive padding in the game to the point where most of the time you're not really doing anything interesting. You're just kind of going through the motions and just trying to get from one point to the other in order to complete the game. This is not a game that falls into one of those examples. This is a game that utilizes the open world in a very critical way to help evolve its systems in place. And what it does is it provides you with just an enormous amount of exploration, an enormous amount of artistic beauty and wonder, and just, it's a sight to behold, kind of walking around this place. Graphically, it's not Cyberpunk, that I just played. It's not Horizon Forbidden West that I also just played. It's not graphically on the level of those games, but it excels in its artistic direction, and it looks really good at some points. This is a very solid looking game. It's a From Software game, so on a technical front, and here's my main critique with the game so far that I have to say. Performance is an issue with this game. We all know it. From Software has an unfortunate bad history of creating very unoptimized games. This game launched in a poor state on all platforms. Wasn't as bad as, some of the other games like I just played. But, it did, there were some issues with performance essentially, and this game is a rather unstable game. From Software needs to do better here. Their games are not graphically complex, from what I can see. It's not using anything like ray tracing, it's not anywhere on the level of like Horizon Forbidden West or Cyberpunk or, even Dying Light, that I played as well. It's not anything like those games. But for some reason, the frame rate here just seems wildly unstable. The game looks good enough, but for the performance you're getting, there's some questionable losses here in terms of why the performance is dipping when it doesn't really look like there's anything that's really going on. So I have a VRR capable display. However, the PlayStation 5 only supports VRR for HDMI 2.1 displays, and because my TV is a 2018 Samsung, it doesn't support the higher bandwidth of HDMI 2.1. But my TV does support VRR. It has FreeSync built in. My Xbox Series X and before it the Xbox One X used it perfectly fine throughout my entire experience playing games on those systems. And here we are with the PlayStation 5 not supporting VRR on HDMI 2.0 displays. And so unfortunately I've had to deal with the frame rate, inconsistencies with this game. I will say that it's not so annoying to the point where you can't enjoy the game, but yeah, you do notice them, and it is rather, unfortunate that this has happened. I had hoped that a brand new generation of systems From Software could just iron out all the performance issues they were seeing, but clearly they have a ways to go here. This needs to be fixed. There's no excuse for it, I feel, especially with how powerful these systems are. And even on PC as well, where people were getting stuttering issues on PC with this game at launch. I think it's since been corrected, or at least, massively reduced. But they need to find a way to make the performance more stable here, just plain and simple. The game shouldn't drop frames like it does. The reason I got this game on PS5 over the Series X, even though I could have used the Series X for FreeSync, is because my TV has a range of 48 to 120 frames per second in the FreeSync mode. And because the Xbox Series X version on average runs about 5 to 10 frames per second worse than the PS5 version, I was already going to be falling out of bounds playing the Xbox Series X version, so I decided to get the PS5 version for that. But even so, I do have to say that the frame rate mostly stays in like the 50s. It doesn't really dip far below that, at least only in critical points does it ever. So it's not so awful that you can't play the game, but it is distracting to the point where you will notice it happening, and it just needs to be fixed. This is too great of a game where you can have these sort of issues, and I think it's a testament to how well put together the game is, that even though these issues are present, they are a problem, but you could still enjoy the game regardless. So that is really my main critique with the game, is just when it comes to performance. That's about it. Everything else about the game has really taken me by surprise. Although I will say that initially playing it, I wasn't so immediately hooked. It took me about 10 hours before I realized just how incredible the world started to be. And I gave myself a chance to explore, and that's what you really have to do when you play this game. Give yourself a chance to explore. If you're someone who kind of likes to go through and do things in a specific order, allow yourself to be a little bit more lenient on that. You'll actually find that the game is very rewarding when you kind of just decide to go in a general direction just for the sake of it, just for the, you know, the hell of it, to see what's out there. You actually find that the game is much more rewarding in that aspect. And so honestly, I think the game is a ton of fun. I think it's fantastic. I am loving the game. And honestly, again, 30 hours into it, I've only seen a third of the world, maybe even if that, is pretty just astounding. And I'm thinking about it right now. Actually, I'm gonna go play it right now after I'm done recording this impressions. I want to get back to its world, man. It's been a treat. It's been a real treat. So I hope you guys enjoyed the impressions video. I will be back with a full hour-length gameplay of just live commentary, me casually playing the game, sometime in the next week or so. So be on the lookout for that. And until then, if you guys have any questions, or if I forgot to mention something that you also think is worth mentioning for praise with this game, or even a critique, be sure to mention it in the comments below, and I'll discuss it there with you guys. All right, have a good one, and we'll talk later. Thanks.